My name is Marcus Lane. I'm 52 years old. For most of my life, I believed that loyalty was the backbone of a good man. I never chased praise or recognition. I just did what needed to be done, especially when it came to family. When my dad had a stroke 12 years ago, I stepped in, moved back into the house I grew up in, took over the bills, quietly, consistently, without being asked. I told myself it was the right thing to do, and for a long time, I believed that was enough. The house wasn't mine. Legally, my parents were still on the deed. But I took care of it like it was. I fixed the roof after the last big storm. I made sure the mortgage got paid on time. I handled the taxes, the yard work, the emergency plumber calls. Meanwhile, my younger sister Rachel built a life out of state. Showed up for holidays and sent texts, like thanks for looking after them, let me know if I can help. But she never did, not once. So when my parents updated their will, I didn't expect a parade, but I didn't expect a betrayal either. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I opened the letter from their lawyer. It said the house, the land, everything would be passed down to Rachel. Rachel deserves it, the note said. She's building a family. Marcus understands. That line, Marcus understands, sliced through me like a whisper meant to silence me before I could speak. When I asked them about it, my mother looked at me like I was being dramatic. My father didn't even meet my eyes. And then she said it, the phrase that would ring in my ears for months. Your sister deserves it, just like that. Years of sacrifice swept aside like I was a placeholder, a steward, a servant, not a son. I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I walked outside, stood in the driveway I'd repaved with my own money, and let the cold air hit me. I had a choice to make, not about fighting them, but about stopping the quiet betrayal I had allowed for far too long. I walked back in, went up to my room, and made one phone call. 8 words. Calm. Final. I won't be paying the mortgage anymore. The days that followed were almost eerily quiet. I kept waiting for a call, a question, even a passing comment, but nothing came. The payment didn't go through, and no one noticed. That told me everything I needed to know. I had become so dependable, so automatic in their lives, that even my absence registered as background noise. That kind of invisibility doesn't happen overnight. It's built layer by layer, with every time you say, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." I started thinking back to birthdays missed because I was covering emergencies, to Rachel's smug little comments like, "You're so good with responsibility," while she breezed through life untouched. My parents always made excuses for her. She was busy, under pressure, trying to build something. But I was building too. The difference is, I was building for them, and when it came time to acknowledge that, they handed it all to her and assumed I'd clap from the sidelines. There's a kind of ache that doesn't come with yelling or heartbreak. It's quieter, but it cuts deeper. It's the ache of realizing that your loyalty has become an expectation instead of a gift. I'd given them over a decade of care, consistency and silence, and they repaid me with assumptions that I'd keep giving, that I didn't matter, that my value was measured by what I could provide, not who I was. So, I made another decision. I wouldn't explain myself, not to them, not to Rachel. I wouldn't write long texts or emotional emails. I simply stopped. I stopped answering messages right away. I stopped picking up groceries for their pantry. I stopped running errands and fixing things around the house. I faded out, not in bitterness, but in clarity. The first ripple came when I heard Dad had missed a medical bill. Then the electric bill was a few days late. My mother called, vaguely asking if I still had access to the accounts. I told her no. There was a pause. No follow-up. Just a quiet, slow unraveling. They didn't panic, not yet, but they felt the shift. and I wanted them to, because the weight they had so carelessly pushed onto me was now slipping out from under their feet. And me? I was finally breathing. I opened an account for myself, not just financially, but mentally. I started putting energy into things I'd shelved for years, hobbies, a side business, even just sleeping in on weekends without guilt. I had always told myself I didn't have time for those things, but the truth was, I never had permission, not from them, from me. It's amazing what you uncover when you finally step back and look at your life. Without the filter of obligation, I started going through old bank records, text threads, receipts, not out of spite, but out of curiosity. Over the years, I had paid nearly $100,000 toward that house. Mortgage payments, maintenance, renovations, utilities, medical emergencies tied to the home. And not once did my parents acknowledge it beyond a passing thanks. It wasn't just money. It was years of my life quietly drained in service to people who saw me more as a resource than a son. So I documented everything. I wasn't planning to sue or make a scene, but I wanted the truth to exist somewhere besides in my head. I created a file, saved every proof of payment, every repair invoice, every bank transfer, not for revenge, but for the record. Because one day, I knew they might try to spin the story, and when they did, I'd have the receipts. Rachel, predictably, started circling back. She sent me a message that started with, "Hey big bro, just checking in." I didn't respond. A week later, another message, "Have you noticed any strange mail from the bank? I'm worried something got missed." I replied with one line, "You'll have to speak with Mom and Dad." That was it. No emotion, no elaboration, just a redirect. I wasn't the cushion anymore. Let them feel the floor. The house, their prized possession, their symbol of legacy, had become unstable. I started hearing whispers from extended family. Questions like, "Is everything all right with your folks?" I didn't answer directly. I let people draw their own conclusion. I wasn't interested in defending people who had discarded me the moment I became inconvenient to their plans. Meanwhile, I poured myself into my own life. I leased a modest condo across town, clean, quiet, sunlit. Every piece of furniture was chosen by me, not inherited or hand-me-down. It felt like the first space I'd ever lived in that didn't carry someone else's weight. I found myself breathing easier, waking up without tension, cooking meals for myself and not worrying if someone else needed a ride, a refill, a bailout. And all the while, the pressure kept rising back at the old house. Property tax notices, mortgage delinquencies, quiet panic from the very people who had assumed I'd always be there, footing the bill, fixing the cracks. But this time, I didn't show up. I just watched from a calm distance as they realized what it costs when the person you depended on finally says, "Enough." The first real crack appeared when Rachel left a voicemail, her voice shaky, forced into a tone that tried to sound calm but couldn't quite hide the fear. She said she'd spoken to the bank and was a little confused about the status of the loan. I listened to the message once, then deleted it. That confusion she felt. It was the echo of every time I'd quietly stepped in to fix things while she lived untouched by consequence. Now, the safety net was gone, and the fall had begun. A week later, my father called. He hadn't reached out directly in months. The message was simple: "We're in a bit of a bind, wondering if you might be able to step in just for a short while." Short while, that's what they always called the lifetime of support I gave them. As if it was temporary, as if it hadn't already cost me years. I didn't respond, not because I was trying to punish him, but because silence was the most honest answer I had left. By then, the house had started to decay. The lawn was overgrown. A few neighbors texted me, asking if my folks were okay. I told them they'd need to check in themselves. I wasn't their keeper anymore. I was just a man who had walked away from a system that fed on his guilt. Rachel showed up at my place a few days later, eyes wide, tone performative, saying, "We're in trouble, Marcus." I didn't realize how behind things were. I let her talk. I let her try to explain how overwhelmed she felt. Then I asked one question. "Did you think I was just going to keep paying forever?" She didn't answer, just stood there, fidgeting, blinking too fast. I told her the truth. Calm, measured. "You were given the house. Now you get the responsibilities that come with it." She started to cry. And for a brief second, a part of me almost softened. But then I remembered all the times I had cried in silence. All the times I carried that house, and everyone in it without breaking, and how none of them noticed. The foreclosure notice arrived shortly after. I knew it was coming. The debt was too high, the taxes too overdue. The house that was so casually handed over was now a liability they couldn't control, and me. I was sitting in my condo, sipping coffee, reading a book, surrounded by the kind of peace that comes only after you've stopped begging for appreciation. They tried to fix it. I know they did. But they were never equipped to handle the reality of what I had been shielding them from. I hadn't just paid bills, I had protected them from the real world. Now the real world had arrived, and I wasn't going to save them from it. When the foreclosure became public, the story started making its rounds, not on the news, of course, but in the hushed tones of family gatherings, group texts, and quiet gossip. My cousin Greg called me one night and said, "Hey man, I heard about the house. Didn't you used to help with that?" I paused for a moment, then said truthfully, "I did. For over a decade, but apparently my sister deserved it more." He didn't respond at first, just sighed and said, "Damn, I didn't know." Most of them didn't, because I never made a show of it, but now they were starting to see the truth. Not because I screamed it, but because I finally stopped hiding it. My parents went silent, not a word from either of them for weeks. I assumed they were embarrassed, maybe even angry. Not at themselves, but at me, for no longer playing my part. That's how entitlement works. The moment you remove your energy from people who've come to depend on it, they confuse your absence for betrayal. But I wasn't betraying them. I was finally being loyal to myself. Rachel tried once more, a final email that started with, "I know things got complicated," and ended with a request to team up and work something out for Mom and Dad's sake. I read it twice. Not once did she mention what I'd done all those years. Not once did she acknowledge the dismissal, the erasure, the injustice. I didn't reply, because teaming up meant going back, and I had no intention of returning to a life built on quiet servitude. The house was sold at auction. I didn't attend. A stranger owns it now. Some investment group, probably. The lawn was cleared. The windows replaced. The place looked sterile, lifeless. But I felt nothing watching it disappear, because the home I fought for had stopped existing the moment I realized my role in it had never been seen for what it truly was. And the best part, I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to post rants or confront anyone in dramatic fashion. My power came from my restraint, from the silence, from letting the foundation of their assumptions crumble under the weight of their own choices. I wasn't the villain in their downfall. I was just the part they took for granted and lost. Now, when people ask how I'm doing, I smile. I tell them the truth. I'm free, not just from the mortgage or the house, but from the role they forced me into. I've reclaimed my time, my energy, my dignity. And there's no dollar amount that could have bought back what I've gained in peace. It's been almost 2 years since the house was taken over. I drive by it sometimes, not out of spite, just curiosity. It looks different now. New siding, new numbers on the door, unfamiliar faces behind the windows. It's strange seeing it stripped of everything I once gave to it, but I don't feel a thing. No ache, no regret. That place was never really mine, not in their eyes. I was just the one who kept it standing until they decided someone else deserved the credit. What I've built since is quieter, but infinitely stronger. My condo isn't grand, but it's mine, every inch. My business, though small, has grown into something steady. I work with people who respect me, and more importantly, I respect myself now. I've stopped over-explaining, stopped trying to earn love through labor. I understand something now I didn't before. Love that has to be bought isn't love at all, it's leverage. And once you step out of that exchange, you reclaim your soul. My parents live in a cramped rental across town now. I heard about it through an uncle. No yard, no porch swing. Just a tiny space and a long list of bills they can barely keep up with. I haven't spoken to them since the foreclosure, and I don't need to. Forgiveness for me isn't about reuniting. It's about releasing the need to explain why I walked away. I don't hate them, but I don't serve them anymore either. That's what healing looks like when it's real. Rachel relocated. I assume the embarrassment drove her out. Word is she's struggling, between jobs, moving around a lot. Again, I don't cheer for that. I don't need her to fail. I just needed her to feel the weight I carried for so long, so easily dismissed. Maybe now she understands. Maybe not, but that's no longer my business. I've put down that burden for good. Looking back, my greatest revenge wasn't letting the house fall. It wasn't the silence or the refusal to rescue them. It was choosing myself, fully, finally. Revenge wasn't fire. It was freedom. It was waking up every day without bitterness in my chest. It was building a life that didn't depend on their validation. It was peace, earned peace. So if you're someone who's been taken for granted, remember this. You don't need to rage or explain. Just stop showing up. Let your absence teach the lesson your presence never could. And when you finally walk away, do it quietly, not because you're weak, but because you've realized your worth doesn't need an audience.